Welcome everybody. This is FunSizeFilm6 and we'll be talking about documented conversations. During the course of any given day in a classroom, teachers are bombarded with information. We are having conversations with students, we're looking at students' work, we're talking to students about their learning, we are making tweaks and accommodations in lessons. It's a continual soup of data and information, and it's really, really hard to notice things and remember important details in the midst of this ongoing swirl. And a lot of times, valuable information gets lost or forgotten in the tumble of the day. But there's too much information for teachers to remember, and the information can be too valuable to expect that you'll be able to remember it and use it. So documentation is a real necessity in these situations. Documentation is like magic. It turns an ordinary conversation into an assessment tool. It turns your reflections, your ideas, the little things you notice into useful data, and it preserves your insights and your information about your students forever. Hooray for documentation. Of course, you have conversations with your students daily, and you can extend those conversations naturally by documenting them after they occur or while they're occurring. It's just taking what you normally do a little step further, and that documentation ensures that no valuable information is lost or forgotten. Documented conversations are particularly important when you want some information about a student and it's something that you can't see or hear. If you want to know how a child solved a problem, if you want to know where the student got that particular idea, if you want to know what a child thinks or why the child behaved in a particular way or made a particular decision, you can ask the child directly and document what you learned. And you don't need to guess or make assumptions or feel confused about what's going on. It never hurts to ask. The student might not be self-aware enough to provide you with the information that you need, but it's certainly worth a shot. Documented conversations have some very unique features that make them particularly helpful in certain situations. For example, if you want to know what a student thinks, the only tool that enables you to get that is a documented conversation. The other thing that's great about a documented conversation is that the teacher, I don't want to say the teacher is in control, but we are. We can control the key variables. We can choose the topic to be discussed. We can decide when the conversation happens, how long it lasts, and we ask a question and the student gives an answer, and we're not waiting for perhaps having a glimpse or glimmer of what the student is thinking, and we're not getting ourselves sucked into a long conversation about some other random thing as we're trying to nudge the student gently toward the topic. We just ask, and the student answers. That's always very satisfying. So, documenting a conversation can happen in a number of different ways. If you choose to, you can record using the audio or video function on your phone or another device. You can scribble notes during the conversation if you want to capture key points. If you're not able to scribble during the conversation, you can take notes immediately after. You try to as soon as possible afterwards so you don't lose any details. You note your questions, what the child said, and your thoughts about the child's response. And of course, you always have to provide supporting information: the date, the place, the time, what prompted you to engage with the child, and, as always, what the conversation revealed to you about the child as a learner. Here's an example of a basic documented conversation conducted by a student teacher in a pre-K classroom, and this was about an investigation of mathematical understanding. So please pause, the film, take a minute to read, and then start up again. Documented conversations can also be really useful in tandem with other assessment tools. So in the example that's before you now, what happened was a student teacher noticed Ben's inappropriate behavior during circle time. Here is Ben. And she documented it with a learning photo. And she had some ideas, a little theory about what Ben might be experiencing, but she didn't know for certain. And if you want to read her theories, they're right here in the documentation that goes with the learning photo. The student teacher had hunches, and she felt that her interpretation was correct, but she didn't know for sure, and she didn't want to make instructional decisions based on a guess. So she decided to have a documented conversation with Ben to ask him about his behavior. What's going on? Well, I noticed that you are not engaged, so on and so forth, and just to see what Ben would say. Here you can see the student-teacher's conversation with Ben that took place in this kindergarten class. And please take a moment to read through the documented conversation. As you can see, the student teacher found that her interpretation was correct, and Ben's description of the kinds of books that he likes and what he dislikes about the books that are being read in class or that are available to him in class gave this astute student teacher information that she could use to make plans that would be more appropriate and more closely targeted to Ben's learning needs. Documented conversations are meant to be purposeful and substantive. Don't document a conversation that is not directly related to something that you are trying to figure out about the student. Documented conversations are meant to be casual. This is not a situation where you're testing students to determine what they know or are able to do. Think of it more as a conversation with a friend about something that is important to the two of you. As the student teacher approached Ben in a friendly way, saying what she observed and asking for his input. Documented conversations are also meant to be brief. Keep it short and sweet. Get in, get your information, and get out. Documented conversations are a really powerful tool, and they're very easy to use. In fact, hopefully I'll remember to come back to this when we're talking about work samples, but you could have a documented conversation about a piece of student work, ask the student information or for explanation, and just write down the information on the cover sheet for the work sample. And really, it just takes a few extra minutes to turn an ordinary conversation into a documented conversation. And the main takeaway I want you to take away from this is that the key thing about documented conversations is that you'll have access to the student's perspective and understanding. And the only way to get that from them is to engage with them directly. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next film.